Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Giant Squidward and No Nose Nose, which are a couple of episodes nobody really discusses. And I get why. I mean, these reviews are probably not going to be very long because there's not a lot of substance here. That sounds mean. I don't mean it in a bad way, I just mean there really isn't much to talk about, as you'll probably be seeing in a few moments. As always, thank you to everyone watching today, y'all are always appreciated. And now, let's just get right into it. In my opinion, Giant Squidward has always existed as a quintessential example of an average, middling, and meh episode. And I won't beat around the bush, that's pretty much exactly how I feel about it even after rewatching it recently. Perhaps it's not an entirely accurate assessment, given there is still some good stuff in this episode, but in general, yeah, those words describe it pretty well. Let's discuss. Giant Squidward begins well enough. Squidward begins his morning in a calm and peaceful manner, spending time tending to his kelp. Gardening is a hobby that really fits Squidward, and so I like whenever it comes up like this. After Squidward uses some bone meal, kelp grow, this ain't Minecraft, on his kelp, we get a pretty funny moment where Patrick appears out of nowhere in Squidward's kelp garden. I was not expecting to laugh as hard as I did in that moment, but I laughed all the same. We move on to shenanigans very quickly after this, which I of course like, and it's fun because Squidward is the initiator of these shenanigans. I also like the magical properties of kelp grow in this episode because sometimes things just need to be completely nonsensical, such as a plant fertilizer being able to make anything grow instantly. Now I'm starting to wonder if kelp grow played a role in fixing Bikini Bottom in Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 4. Much to think about. Before I move on, I suppose I can use this little break between thoughts to say that one missed opportunity on the part of this episode is with its visuals. Like, sure, the visuals the episode does give us are fun, I won't deny that, but I think that they could have done more here. Like, imagine this episode with smoother and more expressive animation, a la seasons 9B and beyond. This is an issue I have with seasons 6 through 8 in general, not every episode mind you, but quite a lot of them. I also have a related complaint about the art style in some episodes, but this isn't one of those episodes, and so it isn't relevant here. Just wanted to put that out there before one of those episodes comes upon us. Anyway, I point out my problem with the kinda dull animation and expressiveness because this episode has so many visual gags with everything growing, and so the missed opportunity of making this episode more visually interesting is more obvious in this case. Now, returning back to the chronological run-through, Patrick's lack of understanding of sarcasm was a bit funnier than I expected, and it also leads to the real shenanigans of the episode beginning as Patrick makes Squidward's nose grow, which is absolutely hysterical looking at it. And then I love how after SpongeBob grows Gary's shell, Gary gives a whole-ass angry rant to Squidward. Seeing these two interact is a bit of a treat considering how Squidward usually detests my boy Gary for one reason or another. I also like to think that after enough years of living next door to SpongeBob, Squidward is able to understand Gary completely, since this is one of the only times we ever see him show this capability. Moving on, the bit with Mr. Krabs was fine, and I liked the bad pun about money. Things then kind of slow to a halt when we've got to sit through the entire awkward interaction between SpongeBob and Patrick. I don't know why this keeps happening. Well, I have ideas, but I'm not sharing them yet. But these awkward scenes have got to go. They're rarely funny, and they're usually just boring and kind of a waste of time. It's almost like anti-comedy, but not in a good way like the one part of Penny Foolish with Mr. Krabs remembering the exact thing that we just watched. This awkward scene also prevents us from getting a montage or anything remotely entertaining before Squidward catches up with SpongeBob and Patrick, which means we get no rule of three or anything like that. I think a Sandy cameo or even a Plankton one would have been interesting, but nah, just awkward muttering and mumbling. And as SpongeBob even Squidward out, the visuals are just off-putting. I get that making Squidward visually repulsive was the point, but that doesn't make it any more pleasant or amusing. It feels like a toned-down version of the Splinter. Now that we're, like, a little less than halfway through the episode, we finally get what the title promised us with a giant Squidward. And I'm not knocking on the pacing here, just pointing out a fact. I feel like with the way this episode is written, it would have been hard to make the concept of giant Squidward fill 11 minutes if he had gotten giant in, like, the first minute or two. Though, now that I say that, perhaps I'm being too nice, because I would have enjoyed an episode with Squidward just trying to go about his day after somehow becoming giant. Preferably, this would have been the result of his own mistakes rather than SpongeBob and Patrick's interference, but I'll take either one. While we get some of this in the episode as is, we don't get very much. This episode also could have even been a short had the show done those after season 5, ignoring the shorter episodes of later seasons here. Anyway, the actual chase with SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward is fine, I suppose, albeit kind of predictable once they reach downtown Bikini Bottom and an angry riot comes out to fell Squidward. I did like the bit about the guy having a torch in his briefcase because if there's one thing about Bikini Bottomites, they're always going to have pitchforks and torches at the ready. Outside of that likable moment, my problem with this scene is that it's requiring some real logic stretches, which yes, this isn't new to the show, but I can only suspend my disbelief so much. Like, it's so obvious that the monster is simply a giant Squidward, so why is everyone reacting like they've never seen this person before? It's weird. I did like how when the random kid was like, maybe he's a nice monster, the lifeguard guy was like, oh, hadn't thought of that. I just thought that lampshading of everyone's violent and pessimistic tendencies was pretty funny. Once the Bikini Bottomites warm up to Squidward, we get a very similar yet very different plot to The Sponge Who Could Fly, where Squidward does all of these nice things for people who are ungrateful. In Squidward's case, it's so they don't literally kill him. The entitlement is ridiculous, and while I'm saying this jokingly, I do mean that. I cannot stand these types of plots. They're irritating. Which reminds me, let me put a tangent sticker up here because this is truly going to be off topic. But I have recently finished watching the critically acclaimed series, mind you, the cultural phenomenon even, Game of Thrones, and let me tell you, oh, and I guess you could consider this spoilers for season 8 of that show, by the way. Anyway, when I say they pulled this ungrateful towards the person saving their ass bullshit with my girl Daenerys Targaryen, man, I was heated watching that show. The way they did this character was so damn dirty, and I'm not even talking about the character assassination yet. I'm talking about the fact that she went up there to the north with her dragons, with her armies, and she had no reason to, just to save their asses from ice zombies, and they were disrespectful and ungrateful, not to mention literally racist and xenophobic. Man, Dany should have left their asses to die, personally. And Jon Snow doing nothing about his own family being disrespectful to his queen and lover? Fuck him too! We hate season 7 and 8 Jon Snow in this house. Frankly, the way the show butchered every character to make them as unlikable as possible, except for Daenerys, who was my girl till the end, and that's because the burning of King's Landing is so comedically out of character I do not take it seriously, needs to be studied. Sansa, Bran, Arya, Jon, Tyrion, Varys, all of them fell victim to this. God, thinking of it now just makes me so mad. But this tangent is long enough. I did not mean to go off like this, so I'll just get back to talking about the Yellow Sponge show now. So, as I was saying, the Bikini Bottomites got some real entitlement issues, forcing Squidward to do all of these things for them so they don't kill his ass. And I will say that Squidward not saying bless you being the thing that makes everyone turn on him is kind of funny as hell, just because it goes to show how horrible these people are, especially when you think that logically he probably didn't even hear the sneeze. And then the part where everyone's chasing him and he's like, I'm a lamppost, was a lot funnier than I thought it was going to be. And wow, there's a lot of those moments in this episode, huh? The end of Giant Squidward was surprisingly wholesome, with SpongeBob and Patrick making their reappearance, because they do disappear for a bit, after building a giant clarinet to turn Squidward back to normal. Unfortunately, because it performs this function, Squidward loses the ability to play it, which leads into the legitimately funny ending of this episode, where we learn that SpongeBob and Patrick had to cut down Squidward's kelp garden to create the clarinet. Squidward ends up chasing them just like earlier in the episode, which is a pretty good ending. Giant Squidward is an alright episode. In some places, it's funnier than it's really got any right to be, which I like, but in other places, the episode is rather dull or even annoying. Visually, the episode ranges from being boring to being unpleasant to look at, so that certainly does this one no favors. And lastly, I think that while the pacing of this episode works within the context of the episode, more broadly it leads to some missed opportunities. All in all, I think it works best in my OK tier, where it comes in with a score of 6.6 out of 10. While at the start of this video I said that No Nose Knows is an episode that no one discusses, I did not mean that this is an episode that I've forgotten, because I haven't. This is an episode that I've never had any trouble remembering. It's actually rather memorable to me. My mind also automatically associates it with the Battle of Bikini Bottom, but I cannot tell if that's due to the importance of nastiness in that episode or the joke of Patrick picking his nose. Anyway, none of this is relevant to my opinion on this episode, I just thought it might be a nice jumping off point, thinking of the kind of space this episode takes up in my mind. I'll also say that although I remember this episode well, it doesn't necessarily stick out in comparison to other episodes of this show. That doesn't necessarily make the episode bad either, just another thing to point out. Getting into the actual episode now, for whatever reason, the beginning of it makes me feel an irrational amount of happiness. Like, literally just seeing Squidward go about the ending of his errands makes me feel this way. Maybe because it kind of fulfills that desire I have to see what the characters do with their lives outside of, when the metaphorical camera is rolling, or maybe it's just the dullness yet perfection of Squidward setting his keys on the table, or even still, maybe it's the fact that Bikini Bottom is a walkable city and I cry every time I think of that fact because I fucking wish, or maybe it's just because everything I've said here are just such small little details that they included when they didn't need to, and that kind of attention pleases me. Not sure. The moral of the story here is that I probably have a problem of some kind. Okay, I'll be serious now. Well, as serious as I can get in these reviews, which I guess considering we're fresh off the heels of the long-ass soapbox moment I had about Sunbleached, isn't a joke that hits quite right. Oh well. Anyway, I love how this episode just repeats the joke from Giant Squidward, except with SpongeBob suddenly appearing in Squidward's flowers instead of Patrick in his kelp garden. The fact that right after this, Patrick appears in Squidward's flowers too is hilarious because of the coincidence of it all, and this all gets in this episode moving pretty quickly. Squidward is great during this first minute or so of the episode, from his unintentional roasting of Patrick to his exclamation about his floors when Patrick starts crying. And speaking of Patrick, the way he laments about not having a nose is actually pretty reasonable because it is something that makes him stick out from the rest of the main cast. I like how this specific fact is kind of lampshaded since the typical background fish don't have noses either. Patrick's lamentation also reminds me of the brief phase I had as a kid where I was upset that I didn't have a hitchhiker's thumb while everyone I knew did. And to a lesser degree, I was also upset that I couldn't curl my tongue when both of my parents can. And watching that one episode of the Powerpuff Girls where Buttercup was so relatable and not having a special power, until it turns out her unique ability is curling her tongue, was definitely some cruel irony for little old me. Moving on. I want to mention that I like the pacing of this episode. Once we hit the 3-minute mark, Patrick's already got his nose, which is an improvement to Giant Squidward, which took half the episode to get what was promised in the title. Speaking of improvements, there is an awkward moment here between SpongeBob and Patrick that actually isn't horrible to sit through. So, like I said, this kind of comedy based in awkwardness can work. If only it was always like this. The part where Patrick removes his bandages is pretty funny and reminds me of Wet Painters. I really like how uncanny Patrick looks with a nose. Even if this strange feeling wasn't purposeful, it helps the episode out a lot to have the feeling of wrongness in-universe translate to one that we, the audience, feel. Because yeah, Patrick simply isn't supposed to have a nose. He just isn't. I find the plot of this episode to be a pretty interesting one, with Patrick getting his nose and having to deal with the realities of it. Unfortunately, the pedant in me is bothered by the inconsistency of this episode, and I don't mean the inconsistency in Patrick having a nose or smelling things in other episodes, but in the much more nitpicky fact that Patrick has repeatedly been shown to enjoy the flavor of food, and a lot of food's flavor comes from our sense of taste, which, if you'll allow me to go on this educational journey for a second, which is enhanced largely by our sense of smell. Or at least our perception of food's flavor is largely enhanced by our sense of smell. It doesn't affect our taste buds, of course. I'll just chalk this up to Patrick enjoying the flavor of food that he's able to get from just his taste buds, and now with his nose he'll be able to enjoy food even more. And I guess since I'm on this overthinking train, I'll make another point about how Patrick later becoming a clean freak actually makes sense when you think about how this is his first time being able to smell things, so he's probably experiencing sensory overload, especially with the bad smells. Kinda smart. And yes, we're shown this, but it can just be just as easily interpreted as Patrick is experiencing these smells at the same intensity as everyone else. What I'm saying is that Patrick is hypersensitive to all smells now, since he hasn't been able to go nose blind to anything yet, or to expect certain things to smell a certain way. His sense of smell has not been fine-tuned like everyone else's. Hopefully that makes sense. The montage of Patrick enjoying pleasant smells is good, with a few good visuals here and there, and at the very least this montage isn't boring. And then, of course, things take a turn as Patrick experiences his first bad smells. At least they inspire him to clean up his act with a 48-hour deep clean, which, my god, that is such a long time, especially for a house as small as Patrick's. What the hell was he doing in there? Of course, cleaning his own house is not enough for Patrick, because bad smells are everywhere, and Patrick doesn't care about privacy. Bill Fagerbaki's delivery throughout this episode is just fantastic, from, I can't live in these conditions, to, this is inexcusable. After Patrick starts bringing his nose justice to people other than himself, I go back and forth as to whether I find Patrick's behavior from here on out to be annoying or not, because while I did joke about him not respecting privacy a moment ago, I am also being serious. He breaks into Squidward's house because of imported cheese, which he then throws away, mind you, and then he literally harasses SpongeBob, who is working out in his own house. He then candles and sprays the Krusty Krab, although this part was just kind of funny. And worst of all, he sprays down Sandy, who is simply walking and minding her business because she has fur, not even because she stinks or anything. Personally, I think Sandy should have pulled the Great Snail Race after that little stunt and launched a foot up Patrick's ass, but that's just me. And of course, Patrick has his good old holier-than-thou attitude throughout all of this, which makes things a bit more grating to watch. I fear that as I describe all this, I'm coming across more annoyed than I actually am. I'd count Patrick's behavior here as a medium offense at worst, as opposed to a minor one, like the way he acted in Rule of Dumb, or a major one, like the way he acted in Driven to Tears. Eventually, everybody has had enough of Patrick's shit. Sandy, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and a somewhat reluctant SpongeBob band together to get rid of Patrick's nose. And I'm with them, because Patrick's behavior is egregious, even if it is entertaining at many points. I love how both hilarious and dramatic this last scene is when Patrick loses his nose, as it just flies off and Patrick cries in despair. And then, of course, we cut to the grave of Patrick's nose, which is just hysterical, and the ending stinger of the episode is just fantastic and unexpected. No Nose Knows is a really good episode. Like, let's think of it like this. There are times where Patrick's behavior becomes annoying, but it's not really horrible or even all that irritating at any point, unless this episode catches me on a wrong day where I get irritated more easily. And Patrick does end up punished for his asshole behavior, so there's catharsis here. And beyond that potential problem, this episode is pretty funny and very enjoyable overall. So that's why I think this episode belongs in Great Tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.4 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. It's funny, I said I didn't have much to say about these episodes, but I suppose I did end up recording quite a bit. But to be fair, I had a lot of tangents this time, and some of them were on the longer side, so I still feel justified in saying that these episodes don't give me much to chew on, since I ended up bringing in all these unrelated things when talking about them, but it wouldn't be me without some tangents, would it? And I think that my tangents are one of the things that set my reviews apart, or at least I hope they are, because they're not going anywhere. And I feel like that's really all I've got to say now. I already said all the closing thoughts I could potentially say, so I suppose I'll just end things here, and I'll see you all in the next review.